the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
That I wanted to ask Ryan and Jack about here. So one of the things that as we look to 2025 and what the Vols repeat odds are going to be and what the roster is ultimately going to look like, I think catcher is one of those things that fans have just kind of penciled in Cannon Peebles as the catcher for Tennessee in 2025. Ryan, do you believe that it's Cannon's job to lose? Do you think folks should assume it's going to be Cannon because there is real competition there with Stone Lawless and company? Like, is it set in stone? Could it be like that actually Cannon Peebles is the DH and maybe he gets some opportunities at catcher and he gets more DH opportunities next year because he was just really good eye at the plate and he really came on at DH for important at bats for Tennessee down the line? Or maybe first base? Like how set in stone is it that Cannon Peebles will end up being the everyday catcher for Tennessee next year?
I mean, I don't really think it's set in stone, and a lot of that's just the nature of the position because you just largely don't have an everyday catcher. Even if you're the weekend catcher, you're not going to be starting in the midweeks, and a lot of Tony teams have been, 2-1 with one catcher starting on Friday and Sunday, and then another starting on Saturday. So just by the very nature of the position, both those guys are going to, or Stone Lawless, I guess, if you're considering Cannon Peebles the favorite, which I would going into the year. Stone Lawless is going to get a lot of opportunities, and not a single one of us would have said Kyle Stark would have ended up being Tennessee's starting catcher at this time last year. So, I don't think it's set in stone by any means. I do think Cannon Peebles is the favorite. I think from what I have seen, and this is just watching practice in a very untrained eye, I think behind the plate, both those guys are pretty similar. I don't see a huge discrepancy either way. And I think Stone Lawless, while his bat's definitely good, is just a question mark because we haven't seen it in any sort of games. And it did feel like, while the power never came for Cannon last year, it did feel like just the productivity of his at-bats, he did kind of figure out really the last month to 6 weeks of the season. It felt like he didn't always get opportunities. But even by the last couple SEC series, it felt like his at-bats were just a lot better than they were early in the season. So I think he's the favorite. I don't think you by any means Sharpie him in as the starting everyday catcher because you just know both those guys are going to get opportunities. And as we learned last year, really anything can happen.
What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, I echo that. I would say Cannon is the, probably going to start the vast majority of games at catcher next season. He feels like a strong candidate to be the starter. And I think you have to love with what he showed at the end of this past season, as Ryan kind of said, with the productivity of his at-bats, just being arguably the best eye on the team down the stretch. It seemed like anytime there was a big moment, he's pinch hitting, or if he's DHing, he was able to at minimum work a walk. And yeah, the power wasn't there, but the numbers at NC State aren't fake. He has shown the ability to have a really, really good season at the plate, and he started as Tennessee's cleanup hitter day one last season. So the potential's there. Tennessee knows the potential's there. Cannon raked in the preseason last year. He was, I think, the best bat on the team from what Ryan told me leading up to opening day for Tennessee when you take into account practices, scrimmages, all that. So Peebles has a ton of upside. He could certainly have a bounce back season at the plate, and I think he's solid defensively. Sure, Stone will probably get some opportunities, maybe at minimum midweek nods every week. But yeah, I feel like Cannon has to be the guy you point to at that position.
Yeah, I just went back and found this, Jack, actually, before you even said it, but just the fall stats from last year, what I was able to track, which I think was like 8 or 10 scrimmages that either myself, Ben McKee, or Mike Wilson were at. He had 483, 14 of 29, 4 home runs, 11 RBIs, and a double and a triple. So, I mean, he raked in the fall, and he was good again in the preseason. That was a good point by you that he started to clean up in the season opener, and that wasn't by accident. So the talent's clearly there, and it felt like the process got a lot better by the end of the year. And if he can stick with that, with his talent, it feels like the results will follow.
Is the defense stuff overblown? Because I think part of it is just Cal Stark was such an elite defender that then you just go, is Cannon Peebles like Evan Russell? And that's not to say like in terms of like, where is he closer to? Is there a path to Cannon being an elite defensive catcher? Does he have the skill set? Is that something that Tennessee expected when they got Cannon, and that he could grow into it, or is it still just going to be mostly a power bat and you want to get by with Cannon at catcher?
I think it's a little bit in the middle there. I think maybe just getting by is like a little too negative of a connotation. I definitely don't think he's a bad defender.
And I mean, getting by is an average. Like, he's an average
Yeah.
defender. He doesn't have like a high like Cal Stark ceiling, which I don't think a lot of catchers do defensively.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Like, I don't think he's gonna become an elite defensive catcher. Obviously, he can continue to get better, and I think he was fine last year. Like, I don't think he was even bad last year. So he can probably improve off of fine, average, and maybe be above average. I don't necessarily see the ceiling as like being an elite defensive catcher there, but it's not a problem. I don't think that's like a knock on his ability to start for Tennessee at all either.
Yeah, I think Cannon has a pretty good arm. Yeah, Cannon's got a cannon. And we saw that a couple of times last year, but, Cal's awareness was just unbelievable. And it's going to be hard to replicate that behind the plate for Tennessee, where you're talking about the back pick. Of course, that was his play, but even in, big spots with runner on third, and there were just so many weird situations Cal executed perfectly last year. And it's maybe going to be a little bit tougher to rely on that to happen every time. With Cannon behind the plate or anybody else. So Cal kind of maybe spoiled Tennessee fans and Tennessee too. But it's not to say that Peebles is bad at all. And I think he's shown in his limited opportunities last year that he's pretty dang good back there too.
I like it. Switching gears here a little bit. One other baseball thing. I don't know, Ryan or Jack, you can answer this. I could, because I'm on the out here and I'm listening to different folks talk about this, and it seems like with the new scholarship stuff that's coming down the pike here for January 2025, baseball is probably going to be the most affected. Like, I know a lot of folks are talking about walk-ons of football, but I still think that's TBD on how much that actually affects the football programs, especially the Power 2 and company over the next couple of years. Baseball, with the amount of scholarships and things like that, have you heard anything from Tony on how he feels? Did they expect this to be coming down the pike and have been planning accordingly? How will this change Tennessee baseball going into?
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.